Hey, it's Marcus from Holosuite, here to help experimental artists make more, better music. In the experimental or ambient sphere, it's very common for artists to just grab all the first tracks that they've made, kind of slam them together, and then turn them into an EP or an album. But in 2024, I'm not sure if that's the best way to do it. So let's look at a few different ways that we can think about our first release. My personal interpretation of an EP and an album is that there should be something that ties the tracks together, whether it's thematically or just sonically. And when you have made your first tracks, often you're just experimenting with different kinds of sounds until you really settle on the one that you like the most. So if you try and put them all together, it's very likely that they're not going to sound like they really flow. And we can kind of force them, but we don't really want to do that because that's not going to make for a great listening experience. It'll also make it difficult if you want to try and take it to a label. They may not also see why you've put those tracks together as well. But there are a few different ways that we could release those tracks that might have the same kind of impact. So let's look at those. Make shorter releases. Choose the tracks that fit together the best, even if it's only 2 or 3, and turn that into an EP and release that. Release singles instead. In 2024, this is the most common way that people are releasing music. And though people in the experimental sphere haven't really caught up, I think it's a great way to think about it because it has a few benefits. So the first is that you can release more often, so that there are more chances for promotion. Also, it allows you to do things like pitch to playlists. It's much easier to pitch one track than it is to pitch an album. And people on, say, Spotify are probably only going to listen to your tracks one at a time anyway. So this makes a lot of sense, particularly if your tracks aren't all meshing with each other. It means that you've got some leeway to be quite different thematically between your tracks. And then when you finally get to a point where you've got a few tracks that fit together nicely, that's when you put your EP together. This is very common in the techno sphere or electronic music, where people will just release single, and then finally go to their first EP, which might only be 2 or 3 tracks. Don't release yet. The hardest pill to swallow might just be that you're not ready to put an album out or an EP out yet. But don't be worried, because there are still ways you could use those tracks. You could give them to compilations. That's one great way to get noticed. The other thing you could do is pick the best 2 or 3 tracks and try and turn that into an EP or album. Build around that thematically or sonically until you get a group of tracks that feel coherent. All the things that you learn will be useful for the next time you go to put an album together. As usual, the most important thing is not to give up. There's always some way to salvage what you've been doing and some way to get your music out there in a way that will make people want to get into it and listen to it. So I hope this helps you build a bit more perspective and confidence when it comes to putting together your first release. If you found this helpful, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And don't forget to check out my free Bandcamp guide on how to get more sales and followers. You'll find the link in the description below. Until next time, keep making music. Cheers.